Okay, terrific. So let me start again. I'm delighted to present our speaker, Muzaffar Chishti, who is the director of the Migration Policy Institute at NYU Law School. Mr. Chishti has over 3 decades of experience both in the practicalities of immigration law and in immigration policy making. One of the very few people involved in today's debate who was there when legalization was implemented over a quarter of a century ago. So I'm delighted to welcome him to UCLA, and he will talk to us about the strange career of comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon to our colleagues in Mexico. I think the strange career of comprehensive immigration reform only matches my own strange career in the immigration world, where I first met Roger at the International Ladies Government Workers Union in New York, where we both got introduced to the thing called immigration debate, when we were both young and had much more hair on our heads. So with that, it's always very, very important for me to come back to UCLA and to be able to speak to all these established scholars and our budding scholars. And I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that the debate on immigration may be happening in Washington, D.C., but the actual impact on immigration probably is going to happen most importantly in the city. In many ways, this is both the ground zero and the mecca of immigration debate, so it's always sort of heartening for me to come back to Los Angeles. So we'll talk today about comprehensive immigration reform, or what is popularly called comprehensive immigration reform, and has been called that since at least year 2000, when President Bush got elected in the U.S. and President Fox got elected in Mexico. We should not forget that both those moments were considered very important, very monumental in immigration history. I think expectations was the election of these two friends across the border with very similar views on immigration that would have comprehensive immigration reform in 2001. And that's why I think the career of CIR is described the way it is, that began in 2001. So, I mean, memories in immigration are always short, and they're always hazy. So let's start with the memory. If Roger had invited me here last year, which I think was his initial inclination, and we were here in September, late September of 2012, or early October of 2012, even mid-October of 2012, even the beginning of November of 2012, if you told anyone that comprehensive immigration reform has a chance of being offered in Congress, they would tell you, you're out of your mind. That immigration had become the third rail of American politics in the presidential debate. Don't forget that the Republican nominee, Mr. Romney, said that all unauthorized people should self-deport themselves. That became the mantra, almost the motto of the Republican Party on immigration. So what happened? We had an election. As we say, elections have consequences. It may not have had consequences in too many areas that we can talk about today, but certainly had a huge consequence in immigration debate. I mean, I just say this only to create a certain amount of levity in immigration debate. In 2007, Speaker Boehner, who was then Congressman Boehner, was asked by a reporter when the Senate had just passed the immigration bill. It was a comprehensive immigration bill, and told him, what do you think about the bill? And the Speaker Boehner said, it's a piece of shit. Literally, he used these words. I would not have used these words if the economists had not used them before I did. But this is a direct quote from the Speaker. So how did then a month after the election, the same Speaker is standing behind President Obama, and one of the rare standing ovations of the day came on comprehensive immigration reform. So how does something like this transform in such short period of time? And this is where politics becomes the central factor in immigration debate. The election happened, and both parties read messages in that election. And as I like to say, for immigration debate, it's not as important to understand the outcome of the election. It's more important to read the outcome of the election. But the Democratic Party at the election of 2012, as this actually now solidifies the Democratic Party's reach to the Latino vote, and therefore a position as permanent majority party in the country. Republicans looked at the same election and they say, unless we do something about this, we're going to be relegated to a permanent minority party. So within a week of the election, these political calculus and dynamics were frozen in our immigration system. But what you read about the election, as I said, is more important than the outcome. And when you actually read the election, the president barely won that election. Despite the fact that we celebrate that he won a huge electoral landslide, it was actually a narrowly won election. If you really look at the 7 states, which are considered sort of the contested states of, where the election could have gone either one way or the other, only 4 of those states have huge electoral big populations, which is Colorado, Florida, Ohio, and Florida. Did I mention Florida? And Ohio, and I think Virginia. In any of those, so this is where the big bulk of the contested vote comes from. The president barely won election in those 4 states. It could have gone easily the other way. And when political pundits looked at why did it not go the other way, the margin of the Latino vote became extremely important. That the difference in the Latino vote from the prior election to this election, therefore became the margin for the president's election. So it became actually written into our political commentary that the election of the president was made possible by the Latino vote. Now, actually, when you look at the Latino vote in that context, you would say what led to the change in the margin of Latino vote, and you could actually argue that the president won the election because of DACA. That if the president had not given the Dream Kids what they got in 2012, the Hispanic vote would not have been as energized as it was, and that made the difference in the margin for the election. So the president, we know, came reluctantly to DACA. Any one of us who are involved in any of those negotiations, and Hiroshi here is credited for giving one of the most important instruments to the president when he offered him the legal analysis as to why it could be done. I don't know how many of you know that. Considered critical in the enactment of DACA. People would say he came so reluctantly to this that he thought he was lose the election if he did DACA. And guess what happened? Instead of losing the election, he won the election because of DACA. A lesson that did not go unheeded in the White House. So you started a new energy on the immigration reform almost 3 weeks after the president got elected. A new open space on immigration got open. And almost there was no bipartisan understanding on almost any issue in our public policy on immigration. We started seeing a bipartisan understanding. That suddenly, senators who had shunned immigration reform for 3 and 4 years, historically being in favor, suddenly found new ground for a common understanding with the Democrats. And this wave of optimism and bipartisanship was not just confined to lawmakers, it got extended to important parts of our body politic and economy. University presidents signed letters in hundreds and 200s, 300, I think, presidents signed a letter for comprehensive immigration reform. Business executives from Zuckerberg to Steve Chase started lobbying Congress. Evangelicals came to the fore. Law enforcement officials came to the fore asking for immigration reform. AFL-CIO and the Chamber of Commerce have not agreed on anything in the last 15 years, suddenly came to understanding on immigration reform. So with all these stars aligned, we thought this thing is really going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. And the president said it's going to happen by August of 2013. Another reminder why presidents should never use deadlines and never use red lines in any office. And we have been waiting for this to happen. And we know that what did happen was an extremely impressive highly partisan, high vote passage of a comprehensive immigration reform bill called Bill S-744 in the Senate in June. That is one bill that has been passed by one body of Congress. Now, I want to take a few moments about the elements of that bill, though not too much. But for this audience especially, there are two very important lessons about that bill, both about the content of the bill and about the process of the bill. This may not be as interesting to the rest of the audiences in the country, but for students of immigration, please note the elements of that bill and the process of that bill for your future education. And I really could not emphasize it more. I mean, the 11.2 million people we all concerned about may never breathe to see a green card. But for scholars and students of immigration history, that Senate-passed bill will live as an extremely important document for a very, very long time. First, on the elements of the bill. I have never seen an immigration bill as comprehensive, as covering the waterfront as this bill. In fact, Hiroshi knows this more than anyone else in this country. I think in our history, we have never seen an immigration bill which covered the waterfront of immigration as this bill did. It covers every nook and cranny of our immigration debate. It covers parts of the debate which we thought would never see the light of day in legislative languages. It touches on many things which are considered sacred cows in our immigration policy and introduces them. It corrects sort of judicial misconduct. It corrects administrative misconduct for years which we thought would never be rectified by Congress in that bill. In terms, it almost defies the word comprehensive to say the S-744 is the most comprehensive immigration bill we have ever seen in writing. But that itself is important, I think, for students of immigration. Now, what does it cover? I mean, we don't have time to touch everything. But it broadly gives legal status to the 11.2 million people who are currently in the country. It does it slowly. It tells them that will make you registered provisional immigrants initially for 6 years, renewable after 6 years. After 10 years, you can become, you can apply for permanent residence, and 3 years from then, you can become a citizen, a 13-year journey to citizenship. But at least it is a well-defined journey to citizenship. And there are obviously strong opponents to this and cynics about whether this will ever happen or no, but the letter of law says this is a possibility. Needless to say, a large number of people are very cynical about this bill, are very suspicious whether it will ever materialize its intent. And many of the criticism of the bill are well taken, and I'm not really sort of negating or dissing any of this. I'm just talking about, in the main, the important provisions of the bill are quite a milestone in our immigration history. It provides a huge new muscle into our border security in a way we haven't seen in a long time. We don't have time to define each of these things, but everything from drones to horseback will be put on our border. We'll be spending about pretty close to $42 billion of new resources on our border. We will be essentially winding down our war in Afghanistan and Iraq and shifting it to the border. Almost the same companies that are important in the war machinery in these two theaters of war will be shifting their war machinery to the border. That's almost the design. In the bill, some of the companies are actually named who will be the contractors for this bill. We'll build a 700-mile fence. So everything you can think about border security is included in that bill. But the more important part about enforcement that it does is an electronic verification system. I think that all of you know that in 1986, when Congress passed the Immigration Reform Act, an important component of that was to penalize employers for hiring unauthorized workers. As a country, we had never penalized employers. In a capitalist system, we thought this is almost as sacrosanct as the Second Amendment, that every employer should have the rights to hire anyone they want in a capitalist system. Congress put a kibosh on that in 1986. But we realized that employer sanctions, maybe well-intentioned at that time, have obviously not stopped illegal immigration. We would not have 11.2 million people today when we had only 4 million in 1986. And many argue that one of the reasons that has not happened is because to comply with employer sanctions laws, people can use fraudulent documents to meet with the requirements of law, both for employers and employees. And we have had a mushroom growth of fraudulent documents. Congress, to circumvent the fraudulent document industry, introduced the electronic verification system slowly beginning in 1996, and now it wants to make it mandatory in this law. That in the next 4 years from the enactment of the law, every single employer in the country will be asked to access information in a database run by the Social Security Administration and the Immigration Service to determine the eligibility of every single new hire. It will affect every employer that you know. It will affect all of us in the United States. A huge new development for an economy of our size. Just to give you a glimpse of that, today there are only 350,000 U.S. employers enrolled in the electronic verification system. It's called E-Verify now. There are 8 million employers in the United States. To scale up something for 350,000 employers to 8 million employers in the course of 4 years, you can imagine, is obviously a momentous task. Electronic E-Verify is a very controversial program. Glad to discuss in the question and hour, but under this bill, it will become mandatory for all employers in the course of 4 years. The third thing it does, very importantly, is it reforms the legal immigration system. The debate over comprehensive immigration reform is that unless we expand the opportunities for legal immigration, we will never control illegal immigration, something that I completely agree with and identify with. So what it does is a number of things. First of all, it increases visa numbers in large number of both employment and family-based categories. Some of these were really considered sacrosanct. It gets rid of the fourth preference of our family-based immigration, which is brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens will no longer be able to come. It gets rid of the category of the married sons and daughters of U.S. citizens over the age of 31, sort of considers them not close enough for being brought to the U.S. But on the other hand, it makes the spouses and minor kids of all lawful permanent residents subject to no cap. They can come in any number that is now available to U.S. citizens. It removes the per country quota system for the employment-based category, because you now have a huge backlog of Indians and Chinese in many of the categories, and that will no longer be the case. And it sort of doubles almost the number of family-based immigration in each category. In the employment-based category, where the reform happens more seriously, it basically, hugely increases opportunities for people to come to the United States. It sort of makes large number of categories subject to no cap. Probably very important to this audience, every outstanding professor can come from anywhere in the world as long as they're deemed a professor without any cap. For probably unknown to all of you, any person who has a PhD in any field from any university in the world can automatically apply for a green card. I'll tell you, I talked to six staffers on this issue, wrote the bill. No one could tell me how that provision got into the bill. There is no lobby on the K Street for PhD students from University of Kathmandu, but they still managed to get a provision that any PhD in any field from any university in the world can automatically apply for a green card. Now, do you think this would ever happen in our immigration legal system? People who are graduates of U.S. universities in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, can get uncapped visas if they come from a U.S. school. So the opportunities for high-skilled people are enormously expanded. And then for the first time, as I said, it touches some of the sacred cows in our immigration, but we introduced the point system. That's something akin to about 120 to 250,000 people every year could come under a merit-based point system. That people could get points for education, for skills, for having stayed in the U.S. for English, and for having an employment sponsorship. We thought that the point system was a Canadian idiosyncrasy and never would inflict the U.S. immigration system. Now it will be part of the U.S. immigration system. And finally, we'll have a temporary worker program, but with possibility of permanent residence for something now called the W visas for less skilled and medium skilled people. Expanding the categories of people who can come with legal visas in huge number. We at MPI did an analysis of how much it would increase legal immigration. It's hard to say because the W visas especially will be subject to how the economy is doing, so we don't have a good number. But we believe that immigration, legal immigration in the country, which is now about close to 1 million green cards a year, will double in about 10 to 15 years if S7744 becomes law. Okay, so these are the important elements of that bill. But the parts that are never get the light of the day because the big elements get all the attention. The discretion of immigration judges increase. Possibility that government is told that you should not detain people, but you should try to find alternatives to detention for people who don't have any criminal history or national security history, we thought would never get an immigration bill, has become part of that bill. And probably, ultimately, to me, a very important provision is a huge new provision on immigrant integration that will start an office for immigrant integration in the USCIS office and establish an interagency task force in the government to work on integration. So waterfront of immigration policy making is part of the Senate bill. The second part, which I think students should really know, that as a process, those of you who like politics, this is the poster child of how democracy should work. It was an impressive action to see. I mean, bipartisan group of 8 senators came in the most collegial way. Their staff working on language produced a bill as comprehensive as I just laid out, put the text out on the website, and amendments were offered by anyone who wanted, and every amendment was put on the website for you and me to see so that we could lobby our members of Senate Judiciary Committee. Senate Judiciary Committee sat for about 10 days, debated every single amendment in the most civil, professional, almost humor-like manner that I have seen. A lot of bantering, a lot of compromise. At the end, came up with a compromise that went with the Senate floor and passed by the Senate by an overwhelming majority. I mean, our Greek forefathers of democracy would have been very pleased to see the Senate action on immigration bill, just as what a model of democratic process should look like. The Senate passes the bill in June. We come to the House. If the Senate was a model of transparency, of bipartisan method, the House is exactly the opposite. It's faced with almost, we have, opaqueness. It's faced with complete every step being measured by politics and ultimately about people's individual positions. There was a bipartisan group of House members, about 7, who started with 8 at one point, and it started losing one Republican after the other. 2 others left only 2 days ago, so now it's a group of 5. And so the comprehensive approach that we see from the House has obviously not emerged, and almost everyone has given up on it. In the meantime, 5 bills have actually moved through the House Judiciary Committee and the House Homeland Security Committee, and which talk about border enforcement, employer enforcement, some elements of legal reform, but no provision in it regarding the unauthorized 11.2 million people. We don't have time to go through the elements of the House bill, but I'll be glad to do that in the question. Suffice it to say that one is that it has no provision about the unauthorized, but there's a particular bill which I want students of immigration enforcement to focus on called the SAVE Act, which hugely increases the ability of the states and localities to enforce immigration law. So as a new dimension in for immigration enforcement, I would say this is a hugely important bill to watch. So I would characterize the Senate bill as something which has tried to remedy many of the things in immigration bill with all its failings, and the House bill essentially trying to do what we did not finish in 1996 as punitive measures towards unauthorized immigrants and the criminal elements in immigration. So these are completely different approaches to immigration. Now the politics. Now we came to the recess. people thought the recess will inform how this debate goes, that the opponents would use the recess to stress their opposition to the bill. The proponents would stress their points of view while people are in their houses. The recess is over, people are back in Congress. I would have to say, ultimately, the recess was a wash. That it's hard to say that there was a clear victor. It was probably a slightly bigger victory for the proponents of immigration reform, because the kind of outcry we had thought would happen by the restrictions on immigration actually did not materialize. But nor did we see any significant shift in the voting patterns or the possibility of patterns of the Republican members of the House. House, as you know, is controlled by Republicans. Speaker Boehner is the Speaker of the House. The House is a rule that House does not bring up any bill unless the majority of the majority does not support it. It's not a written rule. It's sometimes called the Hastert rule. Poor Speaker Hastert is stuck with it whether he agrees with this or no. It's not the Hastert rule that matters. What matters is the politics behind that rule. That House Speaker will not bring a bill to the floor unless his majority of his own caucus supports the bill. So there we have seen a huge division now in the Republican Party between what we call people who are on the high ground of politics and people who are in retail politics. Leaders of the Republican Party, as you probably know, everyone from Jeb Bush to Karl Rove, from both Presidents Bush, number of Republican leaders have come strongly in support of comprehensive immigration reform. So these are people who are concerned about the future of the party and probably concerned about national politics. Every single Republican potential contender for presidency has actually come in favor of comprehensive immigration reform. In his own way, even Senator Rand Paul has come out in favor of comprehensive immigration reform. On the other hand, House Republicans is a different story. What they're looking at is not the national politics or the future of the Republican Party, they're looking at the next election. So as I said from the beginning of my talk, that if it was all about the election, that the next election is the 2014 House election. And the members are looking at their own seats. To be a Republican and to be soft on immigration doesn't do well in primary contests. So people who are actually concerned about the election are obviously looking at their own political fortunes. And Speaker, who has to be elected by the caucus of the Republicans for his own position, has to look at them. So for him to say, I'm going to take a bill to the floor which does not have the support of his own majority, means he will put his own speakership in jeopardy. As someone rightly said, each of these bills has become a jobs bill, my own job. So that's really where the politics has met. So so this is, unless this dynamic changes about the election, it's unlikely to see that the doesn't work every day. Actually, between now and the end of the year, I just did the calculation yesterday, there are only 30 calendar days left between now and the end of the year. In these 30 calendar days, we still have to pass a budget. Congress is going to, the country is going to, our federal government is going to shut down on October 1st if Congress does not pass a budget. We probably dodged the Syria bullet, but we still have a fiscal cliff debate ahead of us. These are extremely important issues we still don't have agreement on. So for them to happen and then have room for comprehensive immigration reform is obviously, we know, a daunting task. So I think it's unlikely in most people's calculations that something will happen in 2013. Then you say, okay, we'll be done with the budget and the deficit by 2013, we'll come to 2014. In 2014, we get into a political calendar. So from congressional calendar, we get into political calendar. The primaries, which is what the Republican House members are scared of, get into gear. And if you're worried about the primary, you're not going to take a risk that time. Luckily for all of us, About 80% of the primaries are done by May. Even states like Arizona and Georgia, the two ground zeros on this thing, their primaries are done by May. And in fact, all the primaries are done by June. Of the two, I think, in July. So possibly you could create, there's a possibility that between the end of June and the end of Congress in November, there is a space for comprehensive immigration reform to come for passage. Now, despite all the, I think, the misgivings and I think the skepticism people have, and some of that I share, we can never call this thing dead. If we learn anything about immigration reform legislations in the past, and I was reminded of recently because I'm writing a little piece on the lessons of IRCA, talk about historians of immigration, every single important immigration bill in this country, except for the Immigration Act of 1965, was passed in an election year. The IRCA legislation in 1986, all of us who were working on the bill, we went on vacation. I went on vacation to India. The bill passed while I was on vacation. Congress was recalled in 1986 by President Reagan because he had just signed a treaty with, in Reykjavik with Gorbachev. And Congress had to be called back to pass. The Senate had to pass the treaty. House was called. House got enough time while Senate was doing the treaty to get time for IRCA to be passed in 1986. In fact, all I'm saying is that despite every single good calculation that tells you it's unlikely to happen in this Congress, we have immigration history on the other side, that these things can actually happen when they're pronounced dead. So in many ways, we really cannot pronounce it dead despite all the calculations on the other hand. There are two things, and I think we are coming to the end of my 45 minutes. There are two things which will complicate this issue, which will make politics much more interesting. One is that the Republicans could throw two curveballs at the Democrats, which I like not playing baseball. I don't know what curveballs are, but it seems to be a well understood metaphor. One is that Republicans will suddenly say, which they're beginning to say publicly, is that we will legalize most of the 11.9 million people, but we will not give them automatic pathway to citizenship. Now, the automatic pathway to citizenship is a misconstrued phenomenon. Even in the Senate bill, the S-744, there is no automatic pathway to citizenship. We don't put these people in a special lane at a highway that you're on your way to citizenship. We are giving them a special pathway to permanent residence. Everyone under our law today who becomes permanent resident, after 5 years of being permanent resident, is eligible for citizenship. The only thing S-744 does is it allows them to become citizens in 3 years instead of 5 years after becoming LPRs. The House people are beginning to argue that we are persuaded by the argument that these people should be allowed to breathe free. They should come out and be out of the shadows and be able to protect their rights and participate in society. But we don't want to give them automatic, new, independent pathway to permanent residence. That will make them legal, they'll get right to work, they'll get right to travel abroad, they'll be free from removal, and they have to use the existing immigration channels to apply for a green card. We won't forbid them from doing that. Which is actually, there's a merit to that. The problem with this is that the existing channels, many of them will not be able to use, because you either have a US relative, or you have to have a US employer to sponsor to use them. And even if you find a US employer to sponsor them, the backlogs of those lines are so long that the calculations are it may take you anything from 30 to 50 years to get a green card under that system. So that's the problem with that House version of the debate. It's not even a bill. But you could see why there could be a possibility of a bill coming from Republicans. Some are now even beginning to argue it could even be a bipartisan effort of providing the status short of permanent residence that will ease the pain of a lot of people, which is what they're suffering, but will not put them on a pathway to permanent residence. If that happens, Republicans will say, look, you are concerned about the plight of these people and we're offering you a solution and you're not taking it? What kind of friends of Latinos are you? That is going to put, I think, the Democratic leadership in a very, very difficult position. The second curveball they could send is we will do something for the Dream Kids. That we understand that the Dream Kids are a category by themselves, that they deserve special treatment. Here are green cards, easy for Dream Kids. And that will once again put the Democrats in a jam. That are we really able to say no to a bill that will give relief to a large number of highly vulnerable and highly meritorious population? So I think the politics on this is going to play in a very, very nuanced way as we approach the elections. So let me conclude, therefore, by saying, as I said at the beginning, this is all about the last election. And the last election changed the dynamic of this debate. So if 2014 is not playing out the way, because exactly of the calculations of politics, for the passage of the bill, then the next obvious cycle then is 2016. That Republicans who were chastened by the lessons of 2012 election, confronted with the national election in 2016, will read into the lessons of the 2012 as they read in the beginning of this debate and say, my God, we are as they did in 2012. By 2016, the Latino participation in the election would have gone up. And therefore, you can see if election is all that sort of regulates how people behave on this, that 2016 may prove to be a much more receptive time to do that than 2013. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that terrific presentation and for the optimistic note on which you ended. So why don't we begin with questions, and why don't we turn to our colleagues at Colegio?
Yes, hold on a second.
¿Está bien en inglés? Sí. Okay.
We have a question.
Thank you, Dr. Muzaffar. I have two questions for you. First, my first question is, what impression do you get from sealing the border to prevent further undocumented population growth in the U.S. as a requirement that the Republican Party insist on to vote for a comprehensive immigration reform? And the second question is, 45% of the undocumented population in the U.S. entered the country with a valid and unexpired non-immigrant visa and became visa overstays. How then can this particular situation be addressed to prevent further non-immigrant visas overstays when the Republican Party, when the Republican standard argument is sealing the border to prevent further growth of the undocumented population?
They're really both very good questions. They're both very good questions, actually. One, I mean, I'm glad you asked me the question about the provision in the bill, which you can't say is just the Republican insistence. It's now part of the Senate bill. And I should have mentioned in the context of, didn't have enough time, about legalization. That even what is considered a more liberal program for legalization in the Senate bill, the bill links legalization to border security and basically has two triggers. There are trigger mechanisms. That first, even the registered provisional immigrant status doesn't even start till DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, presents a plan to Congress. And the Department of Homeland Security starts implementing a program for border security. This is both a fencing plan to start building 700 miles of fences and a new operational plan, as I said, from everything from drones to horseback, will be started putting in place. And then lawful permanent, these people who get temporary status cannot even extend their status after 6 years unless Secretary of Homeland Security authorizes that the plans that were initiated in the beginning of the legalization have actually shown 90% of compliance. This is called the operational control of the border. And the operational control was put in the last in the last part of the debate on the Senate floor, where that secretary has to say that 90% of the people who are trying to cross the border in an unlawful way are being deterred by crossing. Now, frankly, the answer to your question is we really don't know whether 90% operational control is ever going to be possible. But we do know that immigration enforcement at the border has been much more effective in recent years. I think for a variety of reasons, not only just by putting the technology and resources and manpower at the border, but we have a new system of consequence enforcement at the border, that people who cross the border illegally, till a few years ago, you just had to face the inconvenience of being asked to take a U-turn and go back. And you made an attempt again. Thank you so much. You made an attempt again and again to cross. That world is gone. That now you are taken to a magistrate at the border sector, and you're given a criminal trial and a criminal conviction if you cross the border illegally. It's a misdemeanor in some cases, a felony in some cases. So the kind of enforcement now we have by combining border enforcement with the criminal justice system has now put it at a very, very different level than we had in the past. So can I tell you that we'll reach 90% enforcement control? We don't know, but I think clearly the effort is going to be in that direction. As you know, in Mexico, there's a lot of debate on this, that Congress is insisting that actually it should be the Congress that should decide whether there is 90% operational control, that we don't even trust the Secretary of Homeland Security to tell us that this is under operational control. I think that is actually going to be more in contest about the operational control in the future than whether we actually attain the operational control or not. On the overstays, I think, again, probably most of you know that only 50% of our unauthorized population are border crossers. The rest of them are people who enter the country legally on various kinds of visas and then overstay. This bill, Congress has been trying to deal with the overstay problem for a long time. And it insisted in 1996 of doing something called an exit entry tracking system. Now, in the context of 9/11, we have an entry system which is now fully operational. Everyone who enters at our ports of entry and at our airports is now fingerprinted, biometric information collected. The problem is that we don't have a matching exit system. When people leave, we don't capture their record as we do for entry. That's what creates this 50% unauthorized. The bill S-7744 says that we will have a functional exit system within 5 years of the passage of the bill. So that loophole that has been present in our immigration enforcement system is intended to be controlled. In fact, those of you who just saw the Pew estimates only 2 days ago, Pew estimates suggest, which is sort of, with due deference to my friend Jeff Purcell, one of the best demographers in the country, whenever he says whatever the unauthorized population is, we kind of slavishly accept the estimates. And Pew estimate about 2 years ago was that unauthorized migration had fallen down to about 11.2. The estimates about 2 days ago said it has gone up to about 11.8. So the stage where we are seeing a decrease in illegal immigration, that era has ended. That we have seen a slight increase in unauthorized. But even Jeff's study would tell you that it's not the illegal process of the component that has actually increased. It's the overstays that have actually increased. So our unauthorized population is strangely becoming less Mexican and more non-Mexican. And that is where the overstay issue becomes, I think, more relevant.
Okay, so why don't we take another question from Colette?
Yeah, we have another one. Go ahead.
En español. Doctor, gracias por su exposición. Hace un par de años, el doctor Papadimitrios escribió un artículo y hablaba sobre el factor mexicano dentro de una reforma migratoria. En ese sentido, para que una reforma pueda ser exitosa, debe de incluir a la mayor cantidad de población en condición de indocumentado. Siendo que los mexicanos, en el estudio o en el artículo del doctor Dimitrios, eran 3/5 partes de la población indocumentada, aún con los 50 consulados con que cuenta México en Estados Unidos, no existe todavía un programa que facilite a esos indocumentados el que puedan conseguir la documentación o los requisitos para poder aplicar a la reforma migratoria. ¿Por qué no incluir al gobierno mexicano dentro de la reforma migratoria, siendo que la mayor cantidad de población indocumentada es de origen mexicano? Si no se considera el factor mexicano, cualquier reforma migratoria que se apruebe, pues va a ser ineficiente porque no va a alcanzar a cumplir los objetivos para los que supuestamente fue creada. Gracias por su respuesta.
Thank you.
So a brief translation, you can correct me. So the question concerns the documentary requirements for legalization, and in particular the role that the Mexican government could play in facilitating that process. So given the fact that, so as background, the Mexican government makes available to Mexican nationals abroad an identity card, and many governments do that, and roughly 5 million, maybe 6 million Mexican citizens living in the United States have such an identity card with biometric information. So the question is, given the existence of such a card, why wouldn't that be why wouldn't the bill institutionalize that as one of the criteria for establishing the needed documentary status in the United States, and why couldn't the U.S. work more closely with Mexico and with its infrastructure of about 50 consulates to facilitate this process?
Again, that's a really good question. First of all, I think the law doesn't say anything against it. The law has not said that matricular cards will not be used for establishing various requirements. The law, as you know, establishes broad parameters of our qualifications. It doesn't establish the details about how to meet those qualifications. It will say the most important element in the Senate bill, and there'll be similar provisions in other bills, that you have to show that you are in the United States before December 31st of 2012. So any proof that demonstrates that is obviously going to be sufficient. What kind of documents and what kind of evidence will establish that is generally done by what we call regulations in this country. Regulations will be issued after the law is enacted. So there's no reason to believe, frankly, today that the regulations will not accept a matricular card as one of the pieces of evidence to establish your residence. So I wouldn't hold that as the final word on that has been written. In fact, I would suggest that people who are, especially the Mexican government and the Mexican consulates here, should be in consultation with people at USCIS who will be responsible for writing these regulations about the use of matricular cards. And I think banks have started using them, and to the extent that banks are concerned about the integrity, I think that those kinds of issues should also be communicated to the government. I think the second important role that the Mexican consulates will be able to do here, which I think many of them are doing, is really reaching out to the Mexican population that could be potentially eligible for this program. Having cut my teeth in the 1986 law, I implemented a very large legalization program nationally. Outreach in that program was one of the most important things. I mean, this is a vulnerable population which is not easily connected to nuances of law, and they're easily defrauded. I mean, when you're vulnerable, you take solace in every straw of hope that you get. We know that there's only Senate passed bill. There's no reason to believe that comprehensive immigration reform is going to happen. That we know that there are people operating all kinds of agencies around the country, advertising people to come and pay thousands of dollars to enroll in them, which will help them to get qualified. I mean, one of them, sadly, I think this is going to be a big national story, is run by a former very senior official of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, asking people to pay $3,000 with the hope that they will get them earned legalization, a concept that has not even seen the letter of law in anywhere. So we know there's going to be a lot of victimization in this. And sort of both in terms of preventing people from getting abused and in terms of informing them about the requirements and the criteria and how they would meet those criteria, I think counselors are going to play a huge role along with a lot of other community-based organizations in the country to fulfill that role.
So now let's, why don't we will switch back to UCLA, and why don't I take 2 questions from the floor? Yes.
Thank you. I'm curious how undocumented immigrants who have re-entered after deportation, which is, I think, considered a felony if you're caught, how they're handled in the Senate bill, and kind of what your thoughts are about immigrants who have re-entered after a previous deportation, sort of how they are going to be handled and kind of the legal and kind of policy aspects of different bills that might be considered in the future.
Okay, so just to repeat, so the question has to do with the implications of the bill for previously deported undocumented immigrants who have since re-entered the United States and find themselves here.
Yeah, I think Hiroshi knows this more than I do, and I would really defer him. My sense is that there are 2 kinds of populations in this. One, people who came illegally. If they came, my sense is that if they came illegally back before the cutoff date, they will be able to apply. There is actually a provision in the bill that those people who have actually left are not back. That people, this is what was talked about for the Dream Kids also, with the DACA people, that you can seek a waiver for those people, that they may be able to re-enter with respect to spouses and minor kids, I think, by asking the government for a waiver on issues of hardship. So there is clearly in the Senate bill a recognition that family unity is an important component of the legalization process. My sense is that I should really check the letter of the law on this. If you have committed a felony and 3 misdemeanors, you will not, you will be disqualified from applying for RPI status. Whether every felony that's part of the immigration law counts under that, I'm actually not sure. But Hiroshi may know this stuff more than I will. But I think I know at the same time there's clearly a provision in the law that if someone has been removed, is not even physically here, but has a spouse or a close relative, like immediate relative, that they could ever be able to take advantage of the bill by seeking a waiver. You want to add to this?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the details of it. But there are a couple of different things here. I mean, one is that there are exemptions from the criminal disqualifications for immigration-related crimes, but I'm not sure how that's going to be defined. I would look for that. The other is whether the possibility of any sorts of post-conviction relief with a felony. That would be another possible avenue. I don't know the details.
Yeah, I mean, we dealt with this. This is where it's hard for us even to get engaged in this debate at a very detailed level unless we know the damn thing is going to become law, because Hiroshi and I are very important. Other people who know criminal justice system more than either of us know would love which is a theoretical possibility. But when 86 happened, this is where, after this happened, law enforcement people, public defenders, criminal justice types, judges, prosecutors, all over the country are going to get so heavily invested. Like in 86 law, there was similar provisions with respect to the crimes. A lot of attorneys generals came together and he said we should have a method of expungement of convictions, that you will get pardons by governors, suddenly to get rid of criminal convictions that would have normally disqualified you, that you can go for all kinds of sort of remedies against your convictions in the past, where actually most of these crimes are actually state crimes. That's where most of these crimes happen. So state lawmakers, state enforcers, state governors, and your governor will be on top of the list because he's on a special journey to pass every pro-immigration reform that's possible under the sun. So I mean, I think those governors will become extremely activists to make sure that as many people in their states can take advantage of this. So there'll be huge sort of foray of activism by criminal defense types to make sure that this happens.
Okay, another question? Okay, go ahead.
I am curious how the country is going to react if immigration reform ever passes, like at 744, regarding on like how we're going to behave towards other countries. For instance, Mexico, if whatever to pass without that much enforcement, and how it would affect like politics and immigration policies for the future, negative or positive.
Maybe, I guess what I hear there is a question about the implications of comprehensive immigration reform if it passes in some form like this, or relationships with other countries, particularly Mexico, but perhaps others in the Western Hemisphere or elsewhere.
Well, it really depends on whether you feel optimistic about our country or pessimistic. I think this, no matter what happens, I can tell you this with conviction, that the 1986 law really did alter the political complexion of this country. Only 3 million people were legalized in 1986. It was a game changer, pardon to use an overextended word, it was a game changer in so many spheres of our life. The immigration bar, multiplied its numbers by 3 times in 1 year. The number of immigrant organizations that came around the country. Every single immigration coalition that you're seeing in our country today did not exist in 1986. There was only a small coalition called Churla in Los Angeles, which was run by one volunteer person in 1986. And suddenly today, immigration coalitions around the country have become important political forces. People will tell you that the Latino power that we all talk about was made possible only by 1986. So these things really have life-changing, transformative consequences. If this ever becomes law, this will change our country in a way we haven't seen and we haven't even imagined in huge ways. It'll obviously be a political, huge event. Just imagine 12 million people entering body politic from which they're out. Just consequences of that for anyone to imagine. What it will do to our commerce, what it will do to our neighborhoods, what it will do for people to do to enter the housing market, what it will do to do educational opportunity. You can't even imagine the consequences of it. They're going to be huge. They're also going to be huge on the other side. There will be a lot of costs associated with it. Our school system is going to have a different demand. Our housing market is going to have different demand. So all those layers is going to have impact that we really do not understand. I'm an optimist on this. I think the country will embrace it as it's done with such changes in the past, and we will be a better country. In terms of what it does with Mexico, which has always been a huge part of our immigration debate, the good news here is our Mexican counterparts may agree or disagree. I think our relationship on immigration with Mexico has become less and less toxic over the last few years. And that's because Mexico has changed so much, while the immigration debate in the U.S. has remained essentially frozen. That last year was actually, we saw more out-migration of Americans going to Mexico than Mexicans coming to the United States. I never thought that would happen in my lifetime. Who would think that would happen while the immigration debate was happening? Mexico is becoming a country of immigration as we speak, instead of becoming a country of emigration. People from all parts of Latin America are coming to Mexico, while fewer Mexicans are coming to the United States. Mexico's growth rate is much higher than ours. Mexico is producing at a rate much more educated people than we are paying. Mexico has become a big exporter of the software industry, almost becoming an example for a large number of countries that it thought it would never become an example of. That's a positive story. So I think the kind of intensity that people felt about migration from Mexico will no longer be there. Mexico will sort of become, U.S.-Mexico relations will sort of reach a new normal, where we'll be behaving it like we behave with a lot of other countries, like Canada. It's not become a constant conversation of intense debate, it's not U.S.-Canada. I think that as a part of this, mostly to do with changes in Mexico, we'll reach a different level of conversation about Mexico than we are engaged in today.
Okay, well, that is a perfect segue back to Mexico. So why don't we take two questions from Colmish?
¿La gente del Colmich nos escucha?
No, is there no response?
No. No, I think that they disconnected. No, and at Instituto Mora in Mexico City, it seems to be there are no people over there. So, do we have any more questions here?
Okay. Okay, so we'll just then. So then let's take the additional questions from Colette.
Okay. So yeah, we have a
question from a member of the of Facebook. Alejandra Castañeda asked, what happens with the category of foreign parents of U.S. citizens or residents?
Could you repeat that? I couldn't make it out.
Yes. Alejandra Castañeda asked, what happens with the category of foreign parents of U.S. citizens or residents?
This is a question we got through Facebook.
Categories.
Don't quite.
Parents of U.S. citizens.
You want to grandparent?
Yeah, I mean, nothing changes about grandparents. Grandparents of U.S. citizens or permanent residents get no status or ability to sponsorship in our immigration law today, and that will not change. If you're talking about parents, that would change significantly under the Senate bill. Right now, the parents of U.S. citizens are considered immediate relatives, and they can come almost instantly and without regard to any caps. But if the Senate bill becomes law, the parents of lawful permanent residents will be in the same category. So that will ease migration.
I have a question.
We have another question here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes, how you doing?
Go ahead with the question. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a kind of a demography type question. The baby boomers, the retirement of the baby boomers, we know that's about 78 million people retiring, and that would create a large vacuum in the labor force in the United States. Obviously, the growth rate in the U.S. will not be enough to be able to attend this big gap of labor force requirement in the U.S. in the next 10, 15 years approximately. What can we do as far as take advantage of the Mexican population in Mexico? How can they take advantage of this situation to be able to enter that job market that will be opening as far as the requirements, the labor force requirements the U.S. will have? And what could that be? Could that possibly be included in the comprehensive immigration reform that could be passed possibly within these 4 years, or possibly the next, to be able to attend the big need that we'll have as far as the labor force requirement in the U.S.?
So maybe you could use that question to talk a little bit more about the implications of or the ways in which the current Senate bill changes the options for employment-based immigration.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, obviously, you know, the state of the labor market, both in terms of the supply and demand, is the driving force for reforming our legal immigration system. I think a lot of us argue, and I do too, that in 1986, why that law was not ultimately successful is that while we dealt or tried to deal with issues of illegal immigration, we didn't even try to deal with the issue of legal immigration. And the labor market needs of the country were therefore left unattended by that law. And today, we have 11.2 million unauthorized people basically doing the jobs that U.S. workers were not available to do. I think the laws of supply and demand are the most critical elements of immigration debate. and much more in the low-wage labor market. I think whatever the story was between 1986 and today, that situation with respect to the realities of our own labor market have just become sharper. It's not just the baby boomers. Baby boomers are retiring at 10,000 a day. I mean, by 2020, like 50% of whatever, close to 50% of our population will be over the age of 55. We as a society are fast getting trappings of European societies where a large number of elderly people have to be served by people in service sector of the economy. So everyone, we didn't recognize this at 86, didn't do enough about it. We are paying the price for it today. That's exactly why in the comprehensive immigration reform, a very robust stream of people entering to do these jobs is going to be important. I mean, I think the other factor is that we're also becoming a much more educated society. I mean, more and more U.S., whatever else you may think about U.S. public school system, more and more section of the population is graduating from high school. And the aspiration of a high school graduate is not to go take a low-skill, low-wage job. And their aspirations are going to be taking, better paid jobs. So in the low-wage and the middle-wage sector of our economy, we're going to have a huge demand for workers. That's why the Senate bill not only increases the possibility of immigration in the high-skilled occupation, it introduces for the first time a new category of visas called W visas, which are geared towards low-skill and mid-skill level occupations. And it ties that to the state of the labor market, that there will be, it's not a commission, but there will be a mechanism, a body established within the immigration service, which will decide how many workers is the U.S. economy need in the next foreseeable futures and in what occupations. And therefore, the level for that category is going to be decided by the labor market conditions. It has been set in the bill only at 22,000 today, but can go up to 220,000, determined by the state of the labor market. So therefore, we are opening for the first time the possibility of people coming in on temporary workers to produce these jobs. Before anyone raises, sort of hackles about it, that this is the beginning of the guest worker program. This particular program is clearly a temporary worker program, but has a possibility of migration to permanent residence by sponsorship by a U.S. employer, or if you earn enough points by your education, by your skill, by your employment, then you can enter the permanent residence stream in the merit-based system and earn a green card. So this is kind of a two-stage process of coming in as temporary worker, but potentially become a permanent resident. So it's a hybrid, and I think a reasonably impressive hybrid to look at to meet the kind of labor market needs that we see we'll have by an aging society and by a more educated society.
Other questions? Yes, Irene.
Hi. I suppose this is a question about the relative influence of strange bedfellow coalitions, economic interests, employers, commerce versus an ethnic constituency, the Latino vote, and how it might or might not push comprehensive immigration reform either probably in 2016 if it doesn't happen before then. I don't know that we can clearly differentiate these two entities, but if you could speak to those two.
Well, I mean, I have actually never, this is exactly what has made the comprehensive approach, is that on the policy side of it, I mean, I was talking to some of the undergraduates here in the class. This is the very interesting thing about the division between politics and policy in immigration debate. I mean, from the policy point of view, we have attained an extraordinary coalition for the first time on immigration reform. Really extraordinary. I mean, historians at one point about the Senate bill that I didn't mention as groundbreaking history, which again, at least students of political science should know, it's for the first time, and really any immigration historian may prove me wrong, it's for the first time that every single Democrat in the Senate passed for a liberal immigration policy. It has never happened before. I mean, this coalition has really now come to fore where there is so much consensus at a policy level on immigration that everyone from Mayor Bloomberg to the head of the Service Employees International Union believes we need comprehensive immigration reform, and we need all the components of the comprehensive immigration reform. What advocates, I think, to their credit, have been successful is that someone like Mayor Bloomberg, who says we really need high-skilled people and rich people to come to the country because they make our economy go. Two people who think we need people to do janitorial services and do elder care. They all have come on policy under one tent that we have to make this happen together. That it's not just about computer geeks. This is about professors and government workers and sort of service employees all together. That is an extraordinary collection of people. So from merits, we have really achieved a coalition, I think, which we haven't seen, at least in my political time on this issue. That's not enough to get over the politics. That's the problem. That it really is no longer a debate about politics. We have hashed the policy issues and rehashed them number of times. And basically, except for some restrictions on the margin, every person has come to the same conclusion. These are the broad elements of immigration reform that we need. We may differ on details. But that's not enough. We have learned that now about most elements about our public policy. That people still have to vote, and they worry about their next election. Okay, as the only person, among the pollsters that I completely trust is this guy Nate Silver from the New York Times, and Nate Silver, who does not follow immigration. A few months ago calculated there are only 35 seats in the House which are up for grabs. The debate is within those 35 states. And if I look closely, those are the 35 seats where the Latino population is more than 20% of the population. It's become so nuanced a debate that it doesn't play well for your own seat. Unless they can overcome that issue, we cannot align politics and policy.
Yes. To the extent that Mexico is becoming a country, the extent that migrants from other parts of the world, I'm wondering to what extent the U.S. Congress has been paying attention to how Mexico is handling its migration, and how, in the same way that Canada, for some migrants, is like a springboard to the U.S. through the point system, how well institutionalized that is, and how it might affect how people in Congress think about these issues. How might they might coordinate?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a really good question. I can't tell you that people in Congress actually are paying attention to it. I think people in Congress are surprised if you tell them that Mexican illegal immigration from Mexico has kind of peaked. Or people tell you that Mexico is reaching sort of a different level of growth. It hasn't entered the congressional consciousness. I don't think Congress actually even understands how much of our unauthorized population is under control. They don't even want to give credit for their own successes. That's the love, because it really is not about facts in many sections of Congress. It is about how the facts, how the parts of the politics are playing for them. So in that realm, to say that Mexico, we still have going to have an invasion from Mexico, I think works well in the politics. I think experts increasingly, and the people in the administration understand that the bigger problem from Mexico on migration is the point that you're raising, is that it's now becoming a transit country for unauthorized migration from other countries. And principally on that is Central America. I mean, I don't know how many of you are following the stories that there's a huge incidence of unauthorized immigration from Indians, nationals of India, coming through Mexico. They come to Guatemala first. I mean, these things, part of how immigration is complicated, is always connected. I mean, India recently signed a treaty with Guatemala that you don't need a visa to come from India to Guatemala. The moment that happened, tons of Indians started going to Guatemala and then made their entree to Mexico, not to go to Mexico. I mean, you could just look at the nature of their luggage to see that they were not going to stay in Mexico, and then all the news stories spread about how there's Indian migrants. Clearly, but clearly experts on security issue and border security are highly focused and highly engaged on this issue. The governments of Mexico and the United States they are looking at this in the same way as they look at the drug issue. And you could probably say the drug issue between Mexico and the United States is a bigger issue than migration issue today. Among the experts, I think it has reached a very high level. Which also, I think the last point I would make on this is that for any future immigration, especially on the control side, to work, a highly collaborative relationship between Mexico and the United States is critical to this. Whether this will become a successful enterprise in our future will depend a lot between sort of smart cooperation between Mexico and the United States. But the pressure, taking the pressure off illegal immigration, helps a lot in that relationship. And that's why I think the elements of the law are very important for that to become a more natural exercise.
So, why don't we go back to Khalif?
I think we have no more questions, sir, right here.
Okay. Others here on the floor? All right. Well, then let me ask a question. And that is, at some point in the presentation, you described the bill as an exceptional compromise. But I have to say, I don't quite see what is it that is being compromised. Where does that compromise lie? And in some sense, you could say whose ox is being gored and exactly how. And many people describe immigration policy as a conflict between immigrationists and restrictionists, and one can kind of trace that conflict throughout the history of immigration policy making. But it seems to me that certainly in your description of the bill, it is an overwhelming victory for the immigrationists. So I'm wondering whether you could come back to that issue of the compromise and tell us where the essential components of the compromise can be found.
Even on the other side, I mean, what did people who are opposed to comprehensive immigration reform win? Yeah. Okay. Well, first, let's say, what did the advocates of immigrants win? I mean, and again, just think about October of 2012. I mean, the world changed. I mean, suddenly to have 11.2 million people potentially breathe free is, for the life, forget about the life of the country. In the lives of those people, it's, between, darkness and sunshine. And how many other opportunities does it open up? So there's no debate about the importance of that. And I think how it will change the country in terms of its both ethnic, racial, political makeup is a huge thing. For the Democratic Party, it is a huge thing. I mean, the country sees, this is why this has become, I think, frankly, ultimately very contentious. The Republican Party sees these people as 11.2 million unofficial members of the Democratic Party. And they say, why should we make them citizens? Really, because they'll start voting. I mean, that's really, part of the calculation. That's why the word citizenship in this context became a charged issue. So for the pro-immigrants, I think it's no doubt that they gained a lot. But that's why a lot of pro-immigrant advocates, why are they opposed to the bill? I mean, that's, a good question to ask. First of all, they think we have militarized the border in a way we have never seen. That if you especially live in border communities, and I don't even live there, so I don't think I can even pretend to say what it means, that this is sort of turned, that the drone strike now on the border is going to be the same category as the drone strike on the Afghanistan Bagram base. That a drone that sees someone going on the border will think this is an unauthorized immigrant, and that could be a farmer. We've already seen farmers coming up and being rounded up, even before the bill is passed by Border Patrol. I mean, these are people who are third and fourth generation farmers. They're white Americans who were being targeted by Border Patrol because they saw some movement in the. So I think, especially when you look at a remote control war, when it gets less and less at a human level, the problems about border, I think, for a lot of people are really, really problematic. Then the employment verification thing. I mean, I never thought we would live in a country of mandatory employment verification. I thought this would become a loosey-goosey system where employers will be able to do what they want. That's what I think that day looks like if this bill passes over, and that actually that employment verification is going to become a very serious phenomenon. Now, what does that mean for a large number of Americans, both workers and employers? We don't know. That's an uncharted territory. A lot of people believe that this could lead to discrimination against foreign-looking, foreign-sounding people. We know that there was a 1986 study, Dr. Employer Sanctions, which showed significant discrimination against ethnic minority. Whether this will lead to that kind of a discriminatory impact in the workplace, we don't know. But people are really concerned about it, that there are a large number of people who really are authorized to work will be chewed out of the system. If it's not authorized, will lose the option of a job. We are almost headed towards a national ID card. I don't want to sound alarmist about it, but the bill has a provision for tamper-proof, biometric resistant Social Security card, and large chunk of money associated with it. I think that's the closest we will come to a national identification card. Do I have a problem with that? I don't know. I may not have a problem because I was born abroad and I'm used to carrying documents. But there are a large number of U.S. citizens, they think that is ultimate compromise of an American. I mean, so people think that there was a lot of compromise made by people on the other side of this issue. So I don't think it really was a one-sided issue. In fact, people would tell you that Senator Schumer was so wrong about this, that he became so passionate about getting 70 votes in the Senate, that he thought if we get the 70 votes, we will take it to the House and that will pass the Senate bill. That for every, after the vote 60, we had to extract a pound of flesh. And that pound of flesh are the compromises of the kinds that I talked about.
So, any further questions from Colette?
No, actually no, Roger. Thank you.
Okay, so on that note, then, why don't we conclude and thank our speaker for an exceptionally lucid presentation and giving us lots to think about until 2014 or maybe 2016. So. And we will see you at next year's session.